Okay, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for spending your time with us today for our presentation entitled Inside Out, Supporting Student Success. I'm Dr. Nathan Slife, and I have been coordinating and teaching in our undergraduate seminar program for over a decade.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Hawkinson, and I'm the assistant coordinator of the College of Education seminar program. I have 15 years of experience working with students in first-year seminar and academic learning communities, and I've been collaborating with Nathan for the past year and a half here in the College of Education. Yes.
Yeah, and so as we're starting out here, we just want to say, please feel free to ask your questions throughout our presentation. You can use the chat box. Just know that we will specifically take time to answer those questions at the end of our presentation today. We thought it'd be helpful to explain some of the background of our undergraduate seminar program in the College of Education for you. So going back to 2012, the UNLV Faculty Senate revised the general education curriculum to be more in line with some national trends that support students' retention, progression, and completion. And this revision specifically included seminars that focus on helping students transition to college and maintain their success while they're in college. And we call these first year and second year seminars. So many colleges across UNLV created specific seminars for their majors. For example, the College of Business has a first year seminar specific for business majors. In the College of Education, we created our first and second year seminars to be for all majors with a theoretical background in educational psychology. So this is a broader goal to help all students succeed despite their majors. And we've had a lot of success with these seminars over the years. In fact, a few years ago, we were asked by the UNLV upper administration to create a second year seminar that was specific for transfer students, which we did, and we are also currently teaching. And that's the only transfer student seminar at UNLV. So one thing to note is that our seminars are not only for College of Education students. They're for all students at UNLV. However, we're not leaving out our college's focus on teaching and learning. We have a somewhat unique focus on teaching and learning because the majority of our seminars are taught by graduate assistants and part-time instructors from the community, as opposed to all professional faculty. We provide extensive training and ongoing development for these instructors, and it is a joy to work with them and teach in this community of teachers. We pride ourselves with supporting our instructors and in so doing, supporting our students. One more thing to note is how wonderful our students are. They are diverse not only by major and their reasons for wanting to go to college, but also racially and ethnically. Additionally, 2/3 or more of our students are the first in their families to go to college. And that makes our seminars all the more important for their success at UNLV. So let's go to the next slide. So as you can see, we have three main learning outcomes for today's presentation. The first is for you to understand thriving as an approach to support students in transition. There's a lot of research on thriving that we'll share about shortly. The second is to illustrate aspects of thriving from this research in our seminars, in our first year, second year, and transfer seminars. And the third objective is to describe some of our unique class offerings that we're very excited about. For example, a seminar that is specific for veteran students at UNLV. Okay, so what is a successful transition? What does that look like? Well, one way you could answer that is by saying that a student is not only surviving, but that they are thriving. But how would you go about defining what that means? For example, how would you define what it means to thrive in your current work or life situation? Someone might say it means to get enough sleep and not only enjoy what you are doing, but to also appreciate the challenge of it. Maybe something like that. Well, as you might guess, there's a considerable amount of research that has been done on thriving. And Chelsea is going to talk more about the technical components of thriving as a student success model.
Thank you, Nathan. Hi, everyone. We have used this thriving model in our College of Education seminar courses to ensure that our students are experiencing the student success model. And so a lot of what we understand about the success model comes from this book edited by Schreiner, Lewis, and Nelson called Thriving in Transitions. And they talk about general student undergraduate thriving, moving into the university experience, but also get as granular as discussing the differences between first, second, and transfer student experiences. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nuances between those things. And so in this conceptualization, student success is framed as thriving, and it includes psychological well-being and emphasizes the individual motivation and psychological processes that lead to student success. Using thriving as a student success framework helps to explain the differences between students who flourish in college, so those who get involved and invest in their own learning, as opposed to students who just come to college to sort of meet the minimal requirements of their degree plans. And so thriving as a student success model is based on persistence models of student success, including Tinto's model of student integration and Braxton's framework of college student departure. It's also informed by psychological theories, including expectancy value theory, self-efficacy, and positive psychology. Thriving also considers student experiences, interactions, and perceptions of the campus community. And so thriving highlights the outcomes when students engage in specific ways in their college level experiences, which is a little bit of a departure from solely relying on retention and graduation rates to measure student success. And so optimal functioning occurs when students are academically engaged, when they form interpersonal relationships, and they have intrapersonal well-being. So according to Schreiner, basing student transition experiences on the thriving perspective of student success, there's 5 hallmarks. And so these hallmarks include students perceiving their transition experience positively and an opportunity for growth. So focusing on an optimistic perspective. They use healthy coping skills during the transition to engage in activities rather than to avoid them. They believe that they have the support that they need to move through the transition successfully. They access resources during the transition for relevant information, assistance, and support. And they emerge from the transition having grown in personally and significant ways. And so this is any student experiencing a transition. If they have these sort of hallmarks, they're more likely to be what's considered thriving. And so the authors break it further down, again, as I mentioned previously, what is needed for first-year seminar students. And so supporting students in the first year is essential because they are facing so many differences from their high school experience. It's a brand new environment. Things are run in a different way. And so there are some features of the classroom spaces for these transition courses. For example, we want them to be smaller in size so that the instructor can really get to know the students. We focus on discussion. We emphasize creating a community within the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, and support students with navigating the university systems. We include peer support when we can, so that students are talking with other students, former students even, about their success and their experiences going through the transition to UNLV. And then we also collaborate with academic advising, because that's an essential piece of student success as the students are transitioning to the university. And so according to the research, there's 5 key predictors of student thriving in the first year. And the first one has to do with the degree goal. And so when students decide what degree they want to pursue, that can impact their thriving. So, for example, students need to understand the level of education required for certain degree goals and sometimes might not have access to that information. And so it's important that we discuss those things in the first year seminar class. It's also really important that they find role models connected to this intended profession so they have a little bit more understanding about what they'll be getting themselves into as they pursue this opportunity. The next is quality of involvement. This used to be measured as frequency that students are attending activities outside of the classroom, but we want quality of involvement inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so this is characterized by the investment of energy, so that students are investing their energy into these experiences, and then that they're also psychologically invested. the sense of purpose. And so the text actually refers to the research about thriving actually calls this spirituality. And so it's an argument that students who have some foundational sense of purpose for their lives have a better go at experiencing the transition because they have some features that explain what should happen as they're facing these new challenging experiences. And so some presence of a foundational belief system can help students interpret their new experiences as first-year college students. Next, experiences with faculty. And so students, their experiences with faculty contribute to holistic gains. And so this means that students should meet frequently with instructors inside and outside of class, and that the faculty should introduce diverse perspectives about what the first year experience can and should be like. And then lastly, the psychological sense of community. Students with a strong psychological sense of community positively identify with the educational and social structures of the institution. And so this is finding ways to help the students believe that they belong in the classroom and in UNLV generally. And the specifics for second year seminar are very similar to first year seminar. However, we also understand that second year students have a little bit of a different issue as they're facing a transition. They're transitioning from the first year of college when there's lots of resources and activities that are planned for orientation. You're brand new to campus. There's the first year experience program that organizes different activities for students to engage in. And so when you get to the sophomore year, or when our students get to the sophomore year, they kind of recognize that there aren't as many programs that are built intentionally for them. And so in our second year seminar classes, we try to encourage the students that they are an important population and we do care about them. However, they're likely to fall into issues with motivation. And this is known as sophomore slump when they get to this space and time when they're not being as well supported maybe as in the first year. They're also dealing with issues of selecting a major. Maybe they've wanted to change or been afraid to change that major and are looking for support in that particular space. And then there's also a lack of campus involvement that characterizes the sophomore slump. And so we follow some of these principles of thriving in the second year seminar class very similarly to first year. And so the identified ways to support thriving in the sophomore year are connecting sophomores to faculty in intentional and meaningful ways, building community in the classroom and outside of the classroom, focusing sophomore advising on connecting their present and future identities. And so this has a lot to do with the major, figuring out what they want to study and sort of what they want their futures to be like. And then lastly, recognizing that sense of purpose and spirituality as a pathway to thriving in sophomore student success years. And so then the next slide, we'll talk about the specifics for thriving as a transfer student. And again, it's very similar to what we've discussed for first year seminar. However, our transfer students are dealing with sort of a double transition experience. And so they must navigate moving from one institution to the next, to ours, but they also have to deal with everything that our first year students are dealing with, adjustment to the academic, social, and behavioral expectations of this new environment. And so some of the suggestions to support transfer students include fostering integration and involvement by emphasizing social connections and that student-faculty interaction. So getting them connected with their peers, getting them connected with faculty, cultivating a sense of community, but doing it early. It's even more important to help the transfer students feel that they belong on campus right away when we get the semester going, because they're not coming in a large group of first year students who are collectively transitioning together. And so making sure that they have a sense of belonging very, very early on in the semester. And then lastly, easing the academic transition by creating structures to help with the logistical aspects of transferring. So for example, our transfer student seminar embeds many of the college knowledge features of our first year seminar, how to use the Academic Success Center, how to visit the Writing Center. And so some of those things that we wouldn't repeat again in the second year seminar space, but know that our transfer students need to be successful. And so we can move on to the next slide. And so what I've spoken about so far is how students generally transition to the university, but there's even more specific things that can be done in the classroom space to develop activities that support thriving for our students. So we support student thriving in the classroom by ensuring to include this expanded vision of student success within the thriving framework. And so this includes the academic, interpersonal, and psychological considerations when we're designing curriculum. And so here's what we know about students who thrive in their learning environment. They experience academic engagement, and this includes engaged learning and academic determination. So students who are thriving academically are engaged learners, and they're energized by the learning process. They're engaged in the process by making meaningful connections to what they're learning, connecting their understanding to what they already knew, and then figuring out what else needs to be learned, what else they're interested in. These students have a strong sense of academic determination and a desire to succeed and willingness to make the effort. And so when we know that this is the way that students are most successful, we try to design our conversation and activities to encourage students to begin thinking in this way. Next, students who are thriving have developed interpersonal relationships, and these include social connections, but also diverse citizenship. So students who experience social connectedness, they have healthy relationships with friends and others and find spaces where people listen to them, and they avoid situations that lead to feelings of loneliness and actively avoid being in situations that could lead to loneliness. It's very common in the transition experience to have those feelings of loneliness. These students also demonstrate diverse citizenship, and they value differences in one another, and they have the desire and confidence to make a contribution to their community on campus, but also the community at large. And then lastly, the psychological well-being or the intrapersonal well-being. Students who thrive, they have a positive perspective about the world and also their future, and it's characterized by an optimistic way of viewing reality and coping with it proactively. And so again, we can't force our students to think in this way, but we have developed activities and experiences that really support trying to get the students to change their frame of mind to be more in line with this thriving research. And so next, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss different things that we're doing in our classes and how they support this student success model of thriving.
Okay, one of the main ways that we seek to help our students thrive is through service learning. And so what is service learning? This might be something you've heard of before. For starters, it involves some form of service. You can think of volunteering your time to do community service at an organization in town. The learning happens when you not only conduct service, but do some form of reflection about that service. So for example, if one of our students volunteered at a food bank in town, that would be a tremendous experience, but they may also reflect on questions like, I wonder why we need food banks to feed people in Las Vegas. I also wonder if there are certain laws or policies that are helping with that in our town. Might some of those laws and policies perhaps go against helping food banks? And so this leads our students into all different forms of research. Again, for example, a student could research the social issue of hunger or food insecurity, which is one of the paired assignments we have our students do to really get a little bit more in depth into their service learning experience. So that's what service learning is. But what do we do to help students thrive with this form of learning? Well, most service learning in a university setting typically asks students to volunteer just once and do a reflection or an assignment paired with that. We instead ask our students to instead volunteer 3 times. So once a month for 3 to 5 hours at the same location. The reason for this is that we really want our students to build relationships with fellow volunteers and with those that they serve. It is these relationships that are the key to helping support our students developing a sense of purpose in and outside of college and a sense of community, not only in our classroom, but in Las Vegas. For example, if a student volunteers in a kindergarten classroom one time, they might be a little overwhelmed at that time if they're not used to it. But what if they volunteered once a month for 3 months straight? Well, as you might guess, this leads to students developing a relationship with the teacher and those kindergarten students. Those students might say, "Welcome back, Mr. Slife," as you might guess, on that second or third time that our students are volunteering. And isn't that a wonderful experience? All of this supports our students thriving. And some of our most recent assessment results evidence this. So for example, 72% of our students said that their experiences in our seminars improved their commitment to work with others toward public purposes much or very much. 75% said those experiences improved their sense of civic responsibility much or very much. And 74% said that their experiences helped them reflect on their own beliefs in comparison to those of other cultures. These are very impressive results and evidence how great of an impact service learning has on our students thriving.
Another assignment that is embedded in each of our seminar courses is what's known as UNLV experiences, and this is a form of experiential learning. And so this is having students engage in experiences connected to social, academic, and career-related opportunities. In our first year and transfer student seminars, our students are required to participate in 6 different UNLV experiences over the course of the semester. This is considered a form of primary research, or we sell it to the students that way, that they are researching how to make the best experience for themselves, and their experience is going to be different from the next student based on, all of the things that they're bringing with them to the university, all the unique experiences from high school and beyond. And so this assignment has them choose social or academic or career-related opportunities, but the events are UNLV sponsored. And so any UNLV sponsored event, the student can attend, and they provide evidence of their participation, and then they answer a series of questions about how meaningful the experience was in relation to their goals as a student transitioning here or transitioning between first and second year at UNLV. And so these experiences might include visiting with a professor. And this actually is one of the things that we require the first year seminar students to do for their first UNLV experience. We know that sometimes maybe in their prior learning experiences, the teacher was more coming after them to talk to them about what they need and how to improve in courses. And so one of the goals with this is to get the students to realize that it's going to be a little bit more up to them to reach out to their professors for support. And also to let them know that, we're professors, but we're here to help. And especially in a class like first year seminar, we want to figure out how to make the experience the most successful for each individual student. They also might participate in tutoring sessions, visit the writing center, go to UNLV athletic events. I like to share the story that Nathan shared with me about his student veteran class. He has provided the same opportunity, but his students had bonded so much that last year, they chose to go to a UNLV football game all together. So the whole class went together. And so not only are the students getting more connected to the university, they're also connecting to one another. And that's, just a really great outcome of the course and of the project. And so in our second year seminar class, we don't have the UNLV experiences the same way because we expect that they've done some of this college knowledge integration. However, we have them complete what are known as prototyping conversations. And so this is a little bit more career related. In this assignment, students are required to schedule a conversation with a person that can give them some insight on their intended professional future. So whatever it is that they want to do in their lives, they need to meet with someone who can give them some insight about that. These are called prototyping conversations because the conversations help students test out if the information that they're learning from the conversation is in alignment with their professional goals. And so the UNLV experiences, the prototyping conversations, these assignments are intended to support many of the goals within the thriving model, but particularly the quality of involvement and making sure that our students are getting connected to experiences that really matter to them, where they can invest that psychological time and themselves into the exercise. And then, of course, the social connectedness is another outcome connected to thriving that's related to the UNLV experience assignments.
There are many different seminars that focus on students' transitions both at UNLV and nationally. And almost all of these seminars include facilitated discussions that promote learning outcomes such as critical thinking, active listening, self-awareness, and self-regulation. And these types of discussions are absolutely vital for student learning and thriving in college. In fact, Chelsea and I have over 30 years of combined experience between us facilitating these discussions, using different structures and books to do this. Over the past year and a half, our seminar program has teamed up with a nonprofit publisher called the Touchstones Discussion Project. And I think Chelsea and I both agree that this is the highest quality way to facilitate discussions and achieve these types of learning outcomes for our students. So what happens in these discussions? Well, our students are provided with a text that is typically short. Sometimes it is read aloud. Sometimes students read it before class, depending on the text. But the main thing is that students engage in a discussion about that text and about their experiences in relation to it. And that discussion focuses not only on the text and those experiences, but also on how the discussion itself is proceeding, how the discussion is going. For example, students in our second year seminar read texts that are taken from Thomas Aquinas and Martin Luther King Jr., and each of theirs take on rules and laws. So you have an interesting combination of a more ancient perspective of rules and laws from Thomas Aquinas combined or compared to a more modern perspective of Martin Luther King Jr. Our students then hold a discussion about these different views in comparison to their own. And as you can imagine, these can be very lively discussions. However, the Touchstones approach focuses equally on discussing the content of those ideas as it does in discussing the process of the discussion. In fact, at the end of each discussion, the students and the instructor conduct an evaluation of how their discussions went that day. And I think this really separates Touchstones from a lot of other approaches to facilitating discussion. So in these evaluations, they may ask questions like, how did we do today sharing the talking? Did everyone get to contribute? And what you'll find is that these evaluations really help students become aware of how their contributions during the discussion can help other students participate, or perhaps not help other students participate. And this is really getting at the outcomes of self-awareness and self-regulation. I might ask a student, for example, that spoke a lot, if they realize they talk so much during that discussion. Often they don't realize that. And it takes through multiple discussions that they're able to become more self-aware of how their participation, even though it's good intended, how that participation may not give other students a chance to also contribute to the discussion. And that type of awareness is vital for our students thriving at UNLV as an R1 institution. In addition to helping support students' self-awareness, this type of Touchstones discussion also supports students' sense of community and belonging. For example, at the end of one of the semesters, I was asking students what their biggest takeaway was from the semester. And one of my students said that she really liked how we had grown as a team, like grown as a group in our Touchstones discussions. And that type of focus on our class community is absolutely amazing. And it's really made possible through these excellent Touchstones discussions and their paired discussion evaluations.
Something that's going on in our second year seminar and our transfer student seminars is design thinking. And the way that we're teaching design thinking is based on a book called Designing Your Life. And so Designing Your Life is a New York Times bestseller that was written by two Stanford professors, one an engineering professor, one a design school professor. And they began offering a class at Stanford called Life Design that was really sort of applying these design school principles to the life design process. And the course would get enrolled. There wouldn't be space for anybody else. And so basically it just became this very popular course that students were wanting. They wanted this help thinking about how their current identities integrate to their future identities. And so the professors wrote this book to teach the rest of us how to apply design thinking. And it really suits the second year and transfer student seminars really well. And so they suggest to use design thinking problem solving principles. And this is really characterized by frequent testing of ideas, such as the prototyping conversations I brought up just a little bit ago. And so the students begin the semester by assessing their personal lives with the work, health, love, play dashboard. And so what this activity asks students to do is to think about how full, thinking in terms of like a gas tank, like how full is my work life? Am I fulfilled or am I sort of empty when it comes to work? What about health? Am I eating healthy? Am I exercising? Am I engaging in gratitude? And so is that a full gas tank or is it a low gas tank? Love has to do with relationships. And so friendships or connections with family am I meeting? Am I hanging out with people that I love enough? And then lastly, play. Like, what things am I doing in my life that are for just joy? And so one of the challenges too is talking to students when they're thinking about play, they include things like competitive sports, but the authors say, no, not even any competition. Like, what are we doing just for pure enjoyment? And so this is getting at that the holistic thriving, not just academic achievement, but making sure that the student has a balanced sort of approach to life, and not just in school, but beyond. And so next, students are asked to write a 250-word life view where they just have a simple statement, shouldn't spend more than 30 minutes crafting this statement. What's the value or what's the purpose of life? And then repeating the same exercise, what's the purpose of work? And then during that time, when we're completing these sort of like introspective activities, the students are analyzing their schedule. And so they keep track of 10 events a week, and they decide, they measure each experience that they have, the 10 things that they're measuring. How much energy did I get from this activity? How engaged was I? And did I get into a flow state? And so the idea is to help students understand, what do they hate doing and what do they really enjoy? And how do we make sure to repeat the flow activities, the things that we lose track of time when we're doing those. And so then each of these exercises informs the completion of the Odyssey plan. And this is where students map out 3 different 5-year plan possibilities that include features that would embed work, health, love, and play. And so the image on the slide is the completion of one of these 5-year plans. And so the students use words and images, and the idea to use images is important for processing the ideas and thinking out this future fully. And then they measure whether or not the plan, if they have enough resources to follow through with the plan. Do they like the plan? Do they have confidence in pursuing that particular plan? And then does it cohere to the life view and the work view that they wrote? Does it actually fit in with what matters to them in life? Each plan has a 6-word title to give it more power. And then also the students develop 3 questions that would be answered if they were to pursue that plan. And so when the Odyssey plan is created, the students sort of either pick one that they really like or find a way to merge all of the plans together. So that way they're building a super plan essentially. And then the questions are used to begin these prototyping conversations. So who can they reach out to that are going to give them some of the answers to the questions that they're going to discover when they pursue this particular plan, to make sure that they even want to keep following along that plan before they get too fully invested. And so after the Designing Your Life activities in the 2nd-year seminar class, the students are also asked to do some research about what skills are important to their future profession. So ONET Online is a website that's managed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it's really great because it lists not only the work activities that students are going to be required to do in whatever profession they are thinking of, but also the skills that they're going to need to be successful, thinking about transferable skills. And so we have students look at those skills, decide which one they need the most help to develop, and then we have them do research and design sort of a proposal on how they can improve that skill over the next few months, and also talk to people about how to improve that particular skill. And so in terms of the student predictors related to thriving, Designing Your Life and this design thinking model supports the degree goals that students have, and helping them to get even more clear about what it is that they're doing at the university and who can model what they need to be doing in order to be successful. It also helps the students close that gap between their present and then the intended future identities. And so figuring out who they want to become. And then lastly, they're asked to consider and figure out what they need to know. And so this is a feature of that engaged learning. So what did they already know about this career? And then what else do they still need to know moving forward?
Um, so there's this research in higher education that's really trying to figure out what are things you can do that have a big impact on students, that really helps them learn. And we call those high impact practices. And one of these high impact practices is this idea of a culminating experience, something that really kind of helps students think through all of the things they have done that semester and reflect on them in a broad way. So for our seminars, we have all of our students present at the end of the semester at what we call a showcase of service learning. And before I go any further, I just want to invite everybody to this event. If you're able to attend, what you're going to see is our students standing beside their posters that they have created that using guidelines from our librarians. If you're familiar with like a typical science fair type event, or if you've attended an academic conference, this looks kind of like a poster presentation of research where students are standing. There's a bunch of students standing all with their posters, and the audience can walk through and interact with any of the students. And what those students are doing is they're presenting not only their service learning research, but also how that this is an opportunity for them to present everything they've been doing in the course and kind of tie it all together. So for example, how does their service learning and reflection on the reasons why people might be hungry in our local community relate to what Thomas Aquinas and Martin Luther King Jr. had to say about that, and what our class discussed about those things in our touchstones discussions. This also gives our students an opportunity to think through the things that most impacted them for their thriving at UNLV. One student I spoke with last semester at this event was a student that attended college after taking several years off to explore work opportunities. So he was typically older than most of the students in his classes. He explained to me that one of the biggest takeaways from his first year seminar was how his experiences at UNLV events that were assigned in our seminar that Chelsea talked about, how those were just really helped him feel like he was actually a student here, like he belonged here. And that is just absolutely fantastic.
And the second sort of culminating experience is our end of course discussions. And so these take the place of a traditional final exam. Students practice the discussion skills that they've acquired through the Touchstones discussion project, and then they reflect on what they knew when they got to the course, the things that they've acquired, and then the things that they still want to know. We also ask them to discuss how they're going to apply everything that they learned from our class into new situations and settings. And so this discussion gives them the time and space to consider how the course has encouraged their own personal change and development. And the focus on helping students articulate the value of the course is one of the final ways that we support this idea of thriving during their university experience.
Okay, cool. So I hope that we've kind of showed how our College of Education seminars are for all majors and how they're also of very high quality. And that really provides us with some unique opportunities to support what we're calling first and second year interest group class offerings. So for example, one of the seminars that I'm currently teaching is specifically designed for veteran students. And as you might imagine, veteran students that are transitioning either directly out of the military service or after having taken a couple of years off, they have some very specific transitional issues that they're working through. And it is a wonderful experience. I think it's very, very, very helpful for them and their sense of belonging just to be around other veterans that have shared that experience. Even though there's many different branches of the military in my classes, it's just been a fantastic experience for me and for those students.
This semester, we're also piloting one section of first year seminar for students who are required to enroll in a co-requisite math class. And so this is based on college entrance exam scores. And so we're referring to this class as the Achievement in Math Seminar. The activities and experiences have been designed to help students grapple with their relationship with math. So we're using a Touchstones discussion project text that uses math ideas and philosophies as springboards for the discussion. And so the goal of the course is to help students feel more comfortable with their relationship with math, to have more confidence, even just speaking about math. And so the longer term goal connected to the Achievement in Math Seminar is to eventually have an Achievement in Math learning community. And so this academic learning community would co-enroll students in the seminar, the Achievement in Math Seminar, and also their math and then co-requisite math class. So all students are taking the same classes together. And so the focus on a common theme among shared students is one of the features of thriving. It has the potential to foster students' academic determination and engaged learning. And we know that those are predictors of success according to thriving. And we're proud to say that we offer transition courses that are designed to help us retain students and to help them meet their graduation goals. However, by utilizing the thriving success approach, we focus on the holistic development of student success. And that makes us just really excited to do what we do.
Okay, so I think it's just really important just to point out how much we are supported by campus partners. So for example, the veteran class, Ross Bryan is the executive director of the Military and Veteran Services Center, and he has been absolutely amazing, and his staff, in supporting those students in that class. And so that really wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for his time and effort and energy and his staff's. And that really goes all around. So I think we have just a little bit of time, Chelsea, to just give a couple of shout outs. Another person that has been very influential and supportive is Jake Thompson, who's the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education. It was Jake's initiative that helped us really create our transfer student seminar that we're able to offer to that student population. We also have Ted Wiseman from the Office of Online Education and the Office of Online Education in general, helping us with our hybrid approaches and hybrid instruction. Did you want to say a couple, Chelsea, or want me to keep going?
Samantha Godby from the UNLV libraries. She's our education librarian, and she has been incredibly supportive, building materials for library sessions, but also she's teaching with us this semester, which gives us incredible leverage for developing the partnership between the library and our seminar program. We've also been collaborating with April Zangari from the ESSC, the Advising Center in the College of Education. And she just visited all of our first year seminar classes last week to begin this conversation about advising to help the successful transition of students.
And we're probably going to move on, but I think a couple more folks, Karen Violante and Lauren Gatto from first year and transfer student support. They've been vital in their ongoing support, and also, of course, the UNLV Career Services with Elaine McGarry. And there's a bunch of people I'm sure we're forgetting, but it's just, we make a point to teach the highest quality seminars possible. And one of the ways we do that is by really working hand in hand with our campus partners. And that kind of leads us to this really quick pitch. I hope that from hearing all the things we're doing, this might interest you to potentially teach with us. And just so you know, if you're a CCSD educator, we have CCSD teachers teaching with us, okay? So there are opportunities. I just want to focus on just a couple of these. We say it's a unique teacher development focus because we really pride ourselves in giving extensive training and ongoing development and support for our instructors in a way that's really going to help you succeed and thrive in your teaching at UNLV. And one of the ways we do that is we really kind of focus on a community of instructors approach. It can sometimes feel alienating to teach as a part-time instructor, and we want you to be part of the team and to feel that you belong here. So you're probably seeing some of the same things we're doing with our students, we're also doing with our instructors. In terms of qualifications, you would need to have a master's to teach with us, but don't think that it needs to be a master's in the College of Education. We have many different community members coming to us and teaching. For example, we had an amazing instructor that had a master's in vocal performance, and he was amazing. The process is just please reach out to me via email, and then we'll set up a conversation.
These are the references we use to inform our presentation. And then the next slide is our invitation for questions. And so I think that there's a hand raised, and we'd love to hear from Abe.
So sorry, do not think I meant to raise my hand, but I did try to get a picture of the references if you could go back and just missed it. Sorry about that.
This is, yeah, there's a couple of references. The one that I was talking about the most today is the Schreiner, Lewis, and Nelson that was published in 2020. And the UNLV library actually has an online copy that you can check out. And it's a great text. And so then I think the next question, Nathan, and I'll read the question and we can both sort of take turns responding, but what advice would you have for a parent of a high schooler who will soon be going to college? And I think like using this thriving framework, I always tell students, like, of course, spend a lot of time thinking about these academics, but don't forget that you have to take care of yourself too, thinking about healthy habits, thinking about connecting with others. Like just because you're studying all the time does not mean that you're doing a great job, right? There needs to be somewhat balance and figuring out how to do that. In fact, one of our assignments in first year seminar is having students decide if they are getting enough sleep or if they're following a healthy diet. And then they have to track that behavior for a week and look at how research, what research tells us about when you sleep, you do better in school, and just trying to help students realize that some of these foundational things that we need to do for our lives actually do contribute to our success as a college student. Nathan, maybe you have something to add about that.
Yeah, I think I would suggest that the student becomes really intentional about developing kind of their own community at the university they're attending. So, for example, if they're living in the residence halls and there's a choice between living completely by themselves or living in more of a place with a bunch of other students, I would always suggest living in the place with other students to kind of leverage that natural community that will evolve from there. In the same way, we require our students in our classes to attend events on campus because it's that important for them to kind of feel like they belong there. I think some students that go to UNLV, sometimes their experience with the campus is they'll park their cars, go to class, then go straight back to their car. And all it takes is just a couple other things, maybe stopping by someplace on campus or going to an event that is interesting for them so they can feel like they belong here. I think that's just so vital.
Hopefully, Jen, that answers that question, and we can talk more about it too. But Lauren has a question wondering if we have any ideas for activities or workshops for students, for dual enrollment students. So students who are still in high school, but will be making the transition here to UNLV or to maybe any university or college. And sort of my first thought is, and I think any of these topics are great, but figuring out what those students need information about, but I think, one of the things that comes up in the research about thriving is this idea of peer support in the first year experience. And so I think that we can talk all day at students and of course try to help them feel better. But I think one of the key components is that they have peers that have maybe gone through a little bit of the process that can answer some of the questions. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to believe when it's coming from another student who has gone through the experience. And maybe that made you think of something else to say, Nathan.
No, I just want to say absolutely. If it would be possible to have current students go and talk to those students, or even better, students from their high school that are now in college that could Zoom in and just share some lessons learned or anything like that, I think can be really helpful.
And then Jen asked us, and this is a really cool question because she's asking us if this advice would be applicable to someone who's graduating college and who's going to start a master's degree soon. And I can share that our department this semester has been piloting kind of a first year seminar experience for the graduate level. and she's using Amanda Hoffman has been leading this effort, and she's been using some of the content from our open educational resource called College Success. That's published by OpenStax. That's the text that we're using in first year seminar, and she's used that text in some of the activities specifically for master's students, and has gotten feedback that in particular, she used an activity called the 5 whys that helps students figure out, well, what is that overarching purpose? Why am I here in college? And that she got feedback from a master's level student that was an incredibly helpful activity. So I absolutely think some of this can apply. And maybe, Nathan, you have some other ideas about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think don't do it alone. So some master's programs kind of have a built-in cohort model where you kind of are forced to, for better or worse, be with certain students throughout the whole thing. And I love that. I think anything that helps build community is really, really important. It's going to help you succeed. And so don't go it alone. I mean, if you don't have that type of model built in, do some things to help yourself, like kind of get engaged. As a graduate student, you can equally become engaged and feel like you're an actual student just by simple things: attending a football game, attending a sporting event, going to a lecture. Like all of that stuff has a profound impact on your sense of not only like surviving in masters, that can be a challenging transition, but like, you know, thriving and feeling like you belong there. I think that's really important.
I just wanted to circle back because Lauren had asked earlier in the presentation, and sorry I missed this, but asked if we could share the presentation after the meeting. And the Zoom webinar recording is going to be posted on the Scholarship and Practice website. And we can also share the PowerPoint slide with the PowerPoint slides rather with any of our attendees who are interested, as long as Nathan says it's okay. Yeah, cool. Another question is, what should high school counselors tell their graduating seniors as they go off to college? I guess we take on that role in a sense, Nathan, you know, when the students are arriving here, we're advising them in some senses, not in the way that, you know, our academic advising centers do. But I always tell students that the average amount of times that a student changes their major is 5. And so a lot of times they get here and they think that they're stuck in the space, or maybe they've been getting feedback about why they should study a particular major. But I think high school counselors should tell their graduating seniors to remain open to new experiences, because they may not know what it is that they want to do until they start getting out and seeing the way things, you know, happen for them in their experience.
I completely agree. The Designing Your Life focus in our course is all about prototyping and trying out new things, and don't feeling like you have to be stuck on a certain thing. So maybe in high school, you loved a specific class, but when you get to college, you realized you loved more the way that it was taught than the content when you get into it. And so just like Chelsea was saying, just be open to exploring, and just knowing that it's completely fine if you don't have it all figured out. I think the whole idea, like you were saying, Chelsea, about switching majors is a really important thing for students and current college students to kind of embrace and be okay with.
And then, are you finished, Nathan?
No, go on.
Okay. And then so Jen has also asked us what our personal favorite UNLV activities to attend. And I have to say that it's the alumni puppies and pizza event that she hosted a couple weeks ago. I got to bring my dog to campus, and it was a lot of fun. And I invited my students to come. And yeah, but then also I love the athletic events are so, you know, full of energy, but the first year experience activities that are being offered are incredible. Karen Violante and Lauren Gatto are responsible for coordinating different events that first year students can participate in. And if they go to particular ones, they can enter a raffle to win $500 scholarships at the end of the semester. There's just so much, like, not only like just the intrinsic benefit of getting involved on campus, there's also these other motivators to really show our students that we want them to engage at UNLV. And Nathan, maybe you have some personal favorite events too to discuss.
Well, of course, our Showcase of Service Learning tops the lists. I'm just kidding, but I do think that's like an amazing event, especially if you're a community member, if you're faculty or staff or other students, that is a really cool thing to be able to see what students have gleaned from the course, and it's awesome to attend. Beyond that, I think my own students, like Chelsea was saying, attended a sporting event, and that's just a really cool way to get involved. It kind of cements you as a UNLV supporter, assuming you're cheering for UNLV when you're cheering for like the home team. And so I think any UNLV sports, like volleyball, I mean, like all of the sports are just very cool ways to, I guess I'm just all about belonging. Just very cool ways to make you feel like, oh yeah, I am a UNLV student. I'm a part of this university. So I like the sporting things because of that.
I wanted to add, just before we move on to the last slide, to talk to you about some upcoming opportunities that I was mentioning the first year experience, but the transfer students also fall into that category. And so what's going on in the first year experience, this transfer students are also considered first year college students. And so I just wanted to clarify, I don't think I did that earlier, but that the transfer students are welcome to attend all of these first year sort of experience events too.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's easy to think of like the first year experience meaning only freshmen. And really what it means is the first year experience for anybody that's your first year at UNLV. So that wholeheartedly includes all of our transfer students. And there's tons of really, really transfer specific, really nice transfer specific events that Karen Violanti and her staff are putting on for our students.
And so our next slide is a couple of invitations for you. The 9th Annual Summit on Nevada Education is coming up on Saturday, November 4th from 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in the UNLV Student Union. It's an in-person policy-focused event for all fields of education and mental health professionals. The day will feature keynotes and breakout sessions, including topics for educators and human services practitioners. Tickets are $40 or $50. You can use the QR code to get more information on the Eventbrite page. On the Eventbrite page, there's a link to apply for a stipend to cover the registration fee if you're currently an educator or in a human services professional role. And then the next scholarship in practice, the next session will be December 5th. Dr. Noah Romero will delve into how educators and school leaders can incorporate lessons from informal learning to aid in student success. Scan the QR code to register for the Zoom link. Both events will offer certificates which can be used for CEUs. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And feel free to reach out if you want to discuss any of the things that we talked about in greater detail.
Yeah, we love this stuff. So please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much, everybody.